The dense, mist-laden forests of Tora 9 were eerily beautiful under the alien moonlight, each leaf and branch bathed in soft, silvery hues. Alex Carter adjusted his visor, taking in the sprawling landscape that stretched endlessly before him. He was here, after all, to study the ecosystem of this mysterious world, where plants seemed to breathe in rhythm with the pulse of the planet itself, and strange, glowing fungi lit up the forest floor like stars scattered across the ground. It was his first solo assignment as a xenobiologist, and the team had set up a small research station at the edge of the forest, a single metal outpost nestled amid an ancient landscape that felt as alive as any creature he'd ever encountered. His colleagues had left him to manage the initial stages of the research before the rest of the crew arrived, giving him the rare opportunity for uninterrupted, solitary study. Late one evening, with the camp settled into silence, Alex sat in his quarters reviewing field notes on his monitor. His data screen flickered slightly, a reminder of the station's aging systems, and he leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. While waiting for his files to load, he pulled up a video from Earth, a quirky title he'd stumbled across before departing. "Sweet alien girl came into my room at night, then this happened." The ridiculousness of the title had amused him, a brief moment of levity to break the tension of his long hours of solitary work. But the video stalled and froze, his screen blurring into static. Suddenly, a strange hum filled the room, a soft, almost musical vibration that sent a shiver down his spine. The light over his desk flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. Alex froze, his eyes darting toward the entrance to his quarters. The sensation was unlike anything he'd felt before, as if an energy, subtle but powerful, was present, brushing against the edge of his awareness. Before he could stand, he noticed a figure standing in the doorway, framed by the dim light from the corridor. She was slender and graceful, with skin that seemed to glisten faintly under the room's artificial lights, as though imbued with a subtle silvery glow. Her hair fell in a dark, shimmering cascade over her shoulders, and her eyes, large, luminous, and intensely focused, held a depth that took his breath away. The way she stood, silent and poised, made her appear both ethereal and ancient, as if she were a part of the planet itself. For a heartbeat, Alex couldn't move, couldn't think. He felt as though he were looking at something otherworldly, something sacred. She took a single step forward, her gaze steady, and raised a hand in what he recognized as a gesture of peace, her fingers splaying out in a delicate, almost ritualistic movement. The gesture was deliberate, a silent reassurance that she meant no harm. Her presence in his quarters was as surreal as it was profound, and Alex could hardly reconcile the reality before him with his expectation of a remote, untouched world. Realizing he'd been staring, he cleared his throat, stumbling over his words. "I didn't expect to meet anyone tonight," he managed, his voice thick with surprise and a strange, unnameable awe. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that seemed to pierce through him, as though she were absorbing every nuance of his being. When she spoke, her voice was soft and melodic, carrying a slight accent that hinted at the alien language she had mastered to communicate with him. "I am Lyra," she said, each syllable like a note in a song, as if her words were chosen with careful precision. "I come as a guardian of my people's lands. You are Alex Carter, from Earth." The mention of his name startled him. How? How did you know my name?" She smiled, a small, barely perceptible curve of her lips. "We have observed your arrival. The spirits of the forest speak of all who walk within it. I knew you would be here tonight, alone beneath the second moon." Alex felt a prickling at the back of his neck. He was a scientist, a man of facts and data, but her words stirred something else in him, something ancient and primal. It was as if she were speaking not just to him, but to a part of him he hadn't known existed. He'd come here to study, to catalog and document, but now, with her standing before him, he realized he might have been missing something deeper, an understanding that went beyond science and data points. Lyra took another step into the room, and Alex felt his pulse quicken. She moved with an elegance that seemed natural to her, her every motion fluid and intentional, as if she were attuned to the very air around her. Her gaze never left his, and in it he saw something he couldn't quite name, a curiosity, perhaps mixed with a subtle wariness, as though she too were measuring him, testing his intentions. "The Earth people," she continued, her voice soft yet unyielding, They come here to observe, to understand, but they do not feel. They look at the land and see only what can be studied, but they do not listen. Do you listen, Alex Carter? He was taken aback by her question. I thought I did. At least I try to. She watched him closely, and he sensed that she could see through the veneer of his answer, that she understood the truth buried beneath it. She nodded as if she'd expected as much, and turned her gaze toward the window, where the alien forest stretched out under the moonlight. There is more to Tora 9 than what you can document, she said softly. The land has a spirit, an energy that binds us all. To understand this world, you must feel its rhythm, not just record its patterns. Alex listened, captivated by her words, feeling himself drawn into her world, into the depth of her understanding. He wanted to ask her more, to know everything she could tell him, but he sensed that there were barriers here, barriers of culture, of understanding, of trust. And yet, in that moment, he felt a strange kinship, a connection that went beyond language or species. She was not just an inhabitant of Tora 9, she was its heart, its guardian, and something in him ached with the realization. Their eyes met, and for a brief charged moment, there was no distance between them, no separation of Earth and Tora, of human and alien. In her gaze, he saw both the vastness of her world and the depth of her solitude, a loneliness that echoed his own. She had lived her life among the forests, in communion with the mysteries of her land, but she had never known what lay beyond her world. And in Alex, she saw a glimpse of that other life, a life beyond Tora, a possibility that both fascinated and frightened her. Slowly, she raised her hand again, and without thinking, Alex mirrored her gesture, their fingertips nearly touching, separated by only a breath. The silence between them was heavy, filled with an unspoken promise, a recognition that neither could explain. In that touch, they both felt the pulse of the planet, a rhythm that connected them, a bridge between their worlds. Finally, Lyra lowered her hand, her gaze lingering on his face for a moment longer. Perhaps. There is something you can learn here that cannot be written in your reports, she said, her voice a soft murmur, almost a whisper. Perhaps you too will come to understand the spirit of this place. And with that, she turned, her figure slipping back into the shadows as if she were part of the forest itself, leaving him alone once more. Yet Alex knew he would never be the same. She had come into his life like a dream, a fleeting vision that felt both impossible and inevitable. And as he stared out into the darkened landscape, he felt a powerful sense of longing and need to see her again. To bridge the chasm between their worlds and to understand the mysteries that lay within her. As he sat in the silence, his heart still pounding, Alex knew that his mission had changed. It was no longer just about documenting alien flora and fauna. It was about something much deeper, something that beckoned him forward into the unknown, drawn by the promise of connection, of understanding, and perhaps of love. In the days that followed their first meeting, Alex could think of little else but Lyra. Her image lingered in his mind, a presence as haunting as the alien landscape itself. He found himself wandering the edge of the outpost each night, half hoping and half doubting he would see her again. But the forest remained silent, its mysteries locked in shadow. She had come and gone like a vision, and he couldn't be sure if she would ever return. Yet, the memory of her voice, her gaze, the quiet intensity of her words stayed with him, making his own world feel distant, insignificant. During the day, he buried himself in his research, documenting everything with a precision he hoped would distract him. The ecosystem of Tora 9 was unlike anything he'd studied before. The trees, each one older than centuries, seemed to pulse faintly, responding to his presence in ways he couldn't fully understand. There was an interconnectedness to everything on this planet, an unseen bond that extended beyond biology. He could feel it every time he touched the soil or examined a plant. It was as if the entire forest was watching him, assessing his intentions. And in this strange new sensitivity, he felt Lyra's influence. One night, just as he was about to give up his quiet vigil, he saw movement among the trees. A shadow emerged, gliding soundlessly toward the outpost. His heart pounded as he recognized the lithe figure and the soft, silvery glow of her skin under the alien moons. Lyra had returned. This time she came closer, standing just at the border where the forest ended and the human structures began. Her posture was relaxed but wary, as if she was testing the boundary between their worlds, deciding if it was safe to cross. Alex stepped forward slowly, his movements careful, as if approaching a wild animal. He stopped just a few feet away, letting the silence between them speak. There was no need for introductions, they both knew why they were there. "You came back," he murmured, the awe in his voice unhidden. Lyra's gaze was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity in her expression. "I am drawn to understand you, just as you are drawn to understand us," she replied, her voice soft yet steady. "We live by different rhythms, bound to our own worlds. But perhaps there is something in each of us that seeks to know the other." The honesty of her words struck him, breaking down whatever remained of his guarded reserve. She wasn't just a mystery to be solved, she was a person, complex and unknowable, yet reaching out to him across an impossible divide. Slowly, cautiously, they began to speak not as researcher and subject, but as two souls trying to bridge the distance between their worlds. They started simply. He asked her about the land, about the plants he'd observed, hoping to learn through her eyes. She told him stories of the forest's ancient cycles, of the spirits her people believed inhabited every tree and stone. Her voice held a reverence he couldn't ignore, a belief so strong it was woven into every word. She explained how each plant, each creature played a part in sustaining the planet's life, a delicate balance that had remained unbroken for millennia. In return, he spoke to her of Earth, of vast oceans and bustling cities, of stars seen from the vantage point of a midnight sky. He told her of humanity's insatiable curiosity, the drive that led them to explore and to reach for worlds like Tora 9. She listened intently, her expression shifting from intrigue to sadness when he explained how, in that pursuit, humanity sometimes lost the connection to the life around them, seeing it merely as data, as resources. "It must be strange," she said one evening, her voice thoughtful, "to live in a world where everything is separate, where one can look at a tree or a river and see only what can be taken from it." "It is strange," he admitted, surprised at how easily he confessed this. "It's like living with half your soul asleep. I came here to study your world, to understand its mysteries, but since meeting you, I feel like I'm only now beginning to see it. You've shown me things I didn't even know I was missing." Lyra's gaze softened, a warmth flickering in her eyes. "Perhaps that is why you are here, Alex Carter, not just to study, but to awaken, to remember that which your world has forgotten." In the days that followed, their meetings became a ritual. Each night, she would slip silently out of the forest, and they would walk side by side under the canopy of Tora's stars. Alex found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing thoughts and memories he'd kept hidden. Lyra, in turn, spoke to him of her people, of their lives intertwined with the natural world, of their fears for the future as Earth scientists probed deeper into their land. They were worlds apart, yet something unspoken drew them closer. Their conversations grew deeper, laden with silences that held more meaning than words could convey. Sometimes they would simply sit together in the quiet, each understanding that they were part of something fragile and precious. But with each night they shared, Alex felt a shadow growing, a weight he couldn't ignore. Their connection, beautiful as it was bound to collide with the expectations of their worlds. The scientific team would return soon, and Lyra's people, the guardians of their planet, would surely see him as an outsider, a threat to their way of life. He knew he was stepping into forbidden territory, treading a path that could only end in conflict. And yet, he couldn't pull himself away. One evening, as they sat at the edge of the clearing, he turned to her, feeling the question burning in his heart. "Lyra, do you think, is there a place for us for this, between our worlds?" She looked at him, her expression pained but resolute. "Alex, our connection defies the boundaries of what we know. I feel it as deeply as you do. But our worlds, they will not understand. The path we walk is one of impossible choices." He reached for her hand, feeling its warmth as she allowed their fingers to intertwine. "I don't care," he whispered fiercely. "I don't care what the world thinks. I just know that being with you, learning from you, understanding you, it's changed me in ways I can't explain. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." She lowered her gaze, a shadow passing over her face. "You are brave, Alex, braver than I expected. But sometimes, love is not enough to bridge the chasms our worlds have created." Her words stung. But he held her hand tighter, refusing to let go. Maybe that's true. But maybe we're here to prove otherwise. Maybe our connection is the bridge, something that can show our worlds that understanding is possible, that unity isn't just a dream. A tear traced down her cheek, glistening under the moonlight, and she offered him a small, sad smile. If only our worlds could see us as we see each other, she whispered. Perhaps then there would be hope. They sat there, wrapped in a silence that was both comforting and unbearably sad, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they had created something precious, something that would remain with them forever. Their love was fragile, a rare flower blooming in the darkness, vulnerable to the forces around it, yet somehow resilient. As dawn approached, Lyra looked at him one last time, her expression filled with an unspoken promise. Tomorrow, she said softly, we will face what must be faced. But tonight, let us simply be here, together, under the stars. And so they remained, side by side, two souls connected by an unlikely bond, knowing that in each other, they had found something beyond the borders of their worlds. In the days following their confession, Alex and Lyra's connection grew stronger, but so did the weight of the invisible walls between them. They were bonded by a love neither had anticipated, a feeling that had defied all logic and convention. And yet, with every shared moment, with every whispered promise under Tora 9's foreign stars, they both knew that their worlds would not be so forgiving. The first sign came when the Teleran Council, the elders who governed Lyra's people with ancient wisdom and an iron hand, summoned her for a private audience. She had been expecting this moment ever since the first night she'd met Alex, but the gravity of it shook her as she made her way through the forest to the council's secluded grove. There, under the sprawling canopy of centuries-old trees, the elders waited, their faces unreadable as they watched her approach. The air was heavy with silence, and Lyra felt the weight of their collective gaze settle over her like a shroud. The Telerans were a deeply spiritual people, their lives interwoven with the life of their planet, and they viewed outsiders with a suspicion that bordered on hostility. Earthlings, to them, were an invasive species, a force of disruption and potential harm. And Lyra knew that, to them, her connection with Alex was not only unthinkable but dangerous. One of the elders, a tall, dignified woman named Nerys, stepped forward, her gaze piercing. Lyra, she began, her voice resonant and calm. We have sensed the shift in your energy, the pull toward the outsider. Do you understand the gravity of what you are doing? Lyra held her ground, refusing to lower her gaze. I do, Elder Nerys. I understand it more deeply than words can express. But Alex, he is not like the others. He seeks understanding, not conquest. Nerys' eyes hardened, a faint crease appearing between her brows. We have heard such words before, from others who were taken in by the Earthlings' promises of peace and unity. Yet each time it has led to destruction, to the erosion of our ways. How can you be certain that this one is any different? Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the unyielding presence of the other elders surrounding her like shadows. She could sense their skepticism, their fear. I know him, she said, her voice steady. I have seen his heart. He honors our ways, he respects our land. And he feels the connection between our worlds as I do. Another elder, his voice a rumble like distant thunder, interjected. Feelings are dangerous, Lyra. They cloud judgment, leading the spirit astray. The Earthling is an outsider, a stranger to our ways. You risk not only your heart but the balance of our world by forging a bond with him. She looked from face to face, a feeling of helplessness clawing at her. No matter how she tried to explain, how she expressed the depth of her connection with Alex, she knew that they could not understand. Her heart ached with the knowledge that her own people, the ones who had taught her to revere the unity of life, now saw her love as a betrayal of everything they stood for. With a heavy heart, she returned to Alex, who waited anxiously at the edge of the forest, his expression a mix of hope and dread. She could see the concern in his eyes, the silent question he didn't dare voice. She took his hands, pulling him close as she pressed her forehead to his, seeking comfort in his presence. They don't understand, she whispered, her voice laced with frustration and sorrow. To them, you are still a threat, an outsider. They fear that my bond with you will unravel the harmony they have fought so hard to protect. Alex's jaw tightened, a flash of pain crossing his face. I never wanted to come between you and your people, Lyra. I would leave if it meant you could live in peace. Her grip on his hands tightened, and she shook her head. Don't say that. You are not just a visitor here. You are part of this world now, part of me. I don't want to lose you because of their fear. They stood in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on them. But in the days that followed, it became clear that Lyra's people weren't the only ones wary of their relationship. The news of his encounters with the Tuluran natives had reached Alex's superiors back on Earth, and soon he found himself in a tense communication with Dr. Mendez, the head scientist overseeing the research mission. Dr. Mendez's voice crackled over the comm, sharp and unforgiving. I've been hearing disturbing reports that you've been spending time with one of the locals, Lyra. Is that true? Alex's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his voice steady. Yes, Dr. Mendez. I've been in contact with her. She's been helping me understand the ecosystem here on Tellura 9. It's invaluable information. There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. Carter, this is a research mission. You are there to observe, to document, not to fraternize with the natives. Relationships with locals are strictly prohibited. They compromise objectivity and put the mission at risk. A surge of anger welled up in him, but he fought to keep his tone even. With all due respect, Dr. Mendez, Lyra isn't just a local, she's the key to understanding this world. She's shown me things I never could have learned on my own. That's precisely the problem, Dr. Mendez retorted. You've allowed yourself to get personally involved, and that makes you a liability. This is not about feelings, Carter. It's about science. As the line went dead, Alex felt a crushing sense of isolation. He was caught between two worlds, both of which seemed determined to deny the reality of his bond with Lyra. In the eyes of his own people, his connection with her was unprofessional, a threat to the purity of his research. To her people, he was an intruder, an outsider who threatened the delicate balance of their existence. No matter where he turned, he was met with resistance, with a cold dismissal of the feelings that had become his anchor. That night, as he and Lyra sat together beneath the stars, he felt the weight of their situation settle over him like a storm cloud. They're trying to separate us, he whispered, his voice raw. Both our worlds. They don't want this. They don't want us. Lyra's gaze was soft but resolute. I know, she replied, her voice barely audible. But I also know that I would rather face their wrath than give up what we have found together. You are more to me than anyone could ever understand. He looked at her, feeling a surge of emotion rise within him. He wanted to fight for her, to show both their worlds that their love was real, that it was something worth preserving. But the barriers seemed insurmountable, and the pressure from both sides grew with each passing day. As the sun began to rise, casting pale light over the alien landscape, Lyra took his hand, her fingers gentle but firm. If we are to find a place for ourselves, Alex, it must be outside the bounds of what we know. We must create a new path, one that neither of our worlds can dictate. He met her gaze, a spark of hope igniting within him. She was right. Their love could not exist within the confines of Earth's logic or the Tuluran's traditions. They would have to forge their own way, to defy the rules laid down by cultures that sought to keep them apart. Hand in hand, they made a silent promise to each other, a vow to face whatever came, no matter how strong the forces against them. Their love had become a bridge between worlds, a symbol of defiance, of unity against division. And together, they would hold on to it, refusing to let it be broken by those who feared what they could not understand. Their love grew in defiance of all logic, a bond that neither distance nor tradition could sever. In the quiet moments they shared, far from prying eyes, Alex and Lyra found a sanctuary that transcended the worlds from which they'd come. Each time they met, it felt like stepping into a realm that was theirs alone, a space where neither human science nor Tuluran tradition could touch them. Here, beneath the starlit skies of Tellura 9, their souls met with an unspoken understanding, a connection that reached deeper than words. One evening, as the alien forest hummed softly around them, Alex felt the urge to understand Lyra's world on a level he never had before. He wanted to be part of it, to grasp what lay beneath her reverence for the land, for the unseen forces she so fervently believed in. They sat together in a secluded glade, surrounded by bioluminescent flowers that bathed them in an otherworldly glow. Lyra took his hand and guided it to the ground, showing him how to feel the pulse of the planet's energy through his fingertips, something that could only be sensed in silence, with an open heart. "Close your eyes," she whispered, her voice soft and steady. "Listen, not just with your ears, but with everything you are. Let the energy flow through you." Following her instructions, Alex stilled his mind, reaching deep into the ground beneath them. At first, he felt nothing but the cool soil against his palm. But then, a subtle warmth spread through his hand, a tingling that grew into a gentle hum resonating within his chest. He felt it a pulse, steady and strong, as if the planet itself breathed in harmony with him. It was unlike anything he'd experienced, a connection that went beyond science or reason. It was as if Tellura 9 had opened itself to him, welcoming him into a hidden world of interwoven energies. And he could feel, for a fleeting moment, the same unity with nature that Lyra did. When he opened his eyes, she was watching him, her gaze tender and knowing. "Now you understand," she murmured, her hand warm in his. "This is the bond that my people protect. It is a thread that ties us to everything, every tree, every creature. This connection is our life." His chest tightened, filled with a strange mixture of awe and love. He understood finally that her world was not simply a place she lived in, it was part of her, woven into her being. And he wanted to be part of it too, to share in this life that was as beautiful as it was fragile. His heart swelled with the knowledge that his love for her extended to the world she cherished, to the mysteries that science could not explain but that he now felt in his bones. But with this understanding came the painful realization that their love, while transformative, was also vulnerable. He knew that the forces against them, both from his people and hers, would not understand this bond they had forged. They would see only risk, only danger. And yet, Alex felt a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. If he had to fight for this love, if he had to stand against both their worlds to protect it, he would do so without hesitation. Lyra seemed to sense his thoughts, and her hand tightened around his. "We have become something neither of our worlds would have chosen, Alex," she said softly. "But that does not make it wrong. Love, true love, bridges what logic would divide." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. They had transcended the boundaries of culture and origin, creating a unity that was powerful in its simplicity. They were proof that connection was possible even between the most unlikely souls, that love could be a bridge over chasms of misunderstanding and fear. But the reality of their situation was never far from their minds. Each time they parted, they felt the weight of the decisions ahead, the knowledge that to remain together would mean sacrifices neither of them could yet fully understand. The pressures from their worlds were mounting, pushing them toward a crossroads that felt both inevitable and devastating. And so, on one quiet night, under the vast expanse of stars, they made a promise. No matter the challenges that lay ahead, they would face them together. They would be a symbol, a reminder to their people that understanding was possible, that unity wasn't just a dream. Their love, fragile as it seemed, had become an unbreakable vow, a vow to build a future where both Earth and Tellura 9 could coexist in peace. With this shared resolve, Alex and Lyra held each other close, finding strength in the knowledge that their love was more than just their own. It was a bridge between two worlds, a beacon of hope for the future, and a promise that, together, they could face whatever darkness came their way. In that moment, under the timeless light of the stars, they became not just lovers but a symbol of unity, a testament to the power of a love that had defied the boundaries of the universe itself. The day of reckoning came sooner than either Alex or Lyra had anticipated. Tensions between their two worlds had been simmering, fueled by misunderstandings, fears, and the unwillingness of either side to see beyond their own perspectives. The Earth delegation, wary of Tellura 9's secrets, demanded further exploration, while the Tellurans saw these demands as invasions, violations of their sacred lands and way of life. Both sides were on the brink of an irrevocable conflict, and Alex and Lyra knew that only they could prevent the coming storm. One evening, as the stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Alex stood with Lyra on the edge of the forest, their hands entwined in a silent show of solidarity. They had decided to confront the leaders of both factions, to appeal for understanding, for a chance at peace. Their love had taught them that unity was possible, that despite the chasms between their cultures, something beautiful and true could emerge. Now, they had to convince their worlds of the same. The gathering took place in a neutral clearing between the Teleran lands and the Earth Research Station, a silent witness to the stakes of this encounter. The Earth delegation arrived first, with Dr. Mendez at its head, her expression hard and unyielding. The Teleran elders, led by Neres, entered from the opposite side, their faces impassive but their eyes sharp, brimming with distrust. For a long, tense moment, the two groups simply stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Alex felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, the burden of countless misunderstandings and years of distrust. But when he glanced at Lyra, he found a steady calm in her gaze, a reminder of why they were here. Together they took a step forward, standing between the two factions, their unity a silent but powerful statement. Alex was the first to speak, his voice carrying a determination that was both steady and gentle. Dr. Mendez, elders of Tellura, we have come here not as representatives of our worlds, but as people who have seen what is possible when we bridge our differences. Lyra and I, we are proof that there is another path, one that doesn't rely on conquest or isolation. Dr. Mendez's eyes narrowed. Alex, you are a scientist, not a diplomat. This connection you formed with one of the locals, it's clouded your objectivity. We cannot risk the mission for emotions. Neres spoke next, her voice calm but sharp. And we, too, cannot risk the sanctity of our world for outsiders who do not understand our ways. Your people come with demands, with no regard for what they might destroy in the process. Lyra took a step forward, her voice resonant with conviction. We do not have to be enemies. The land, the stars, they do not recognize our boundaries. They belong to all of us. This planet has enough to share, but only if we are willing to respect each other. Only if we see one another not as invaders or obstacles, but as fellow beings who deserve to thrive. Her words hung in the air, their simplicity disarming. Alex saw something shift in Dr. Mendez's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, and he seized the moment. Think of what we could achieve if we worked together, he urged. Think of the knowledge, the growth, the possibility of a future where Earth and Tellura 9 stand side by side, each learning from the other. Isn't that why we explored in the first place, to understand, to connect? The elders exchanged glances, their expressions softening as the weight of Alex's words began to sink in. They had witnessed Lyra's bond with Alex, had felt its truth, its strength. It wasn't the product of mere fascination, it was a unity born of respect and shared understanding. Dr. Mendez remained silent for a moment, her face unreadable. But then, with a resigned sigh, she looked at Alex, her expression a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. If there is even a chance that cooperation could prevent conflict, then perhaps we owe it to both worlds to try. Neres inclined her head, a gesture of cautious acceptance. We will consider this. But know that our ways are sacred. They cannot be compromised. Lyra nodded, her voice soft but unwavering. We don't ask for compromise. We ask for respect, for the space to coexist. A tentative truce settled over the clearing, fragile yet filled with promise. For the first time, both sides seemed willing to listen, to consider the possibility of a shared future. Alex and Lyra felt a surge of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they had turned the tide, that their love had become a symbol powerful enough to transcend the walls that had divided their worlds. As the leaders departed, Alex turned to Lyra, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. I didn't know if they'd listen, he whispered, relief threading his words. Lyra smiled, her gaze filled with pride and affection. Love is a language they may not yet understand, but it's a language that speaks to the heart, Alex. And one day they will see, just as we did, that unity is worth any sacrifice. Together they stood under the starlit sky, knowing that while their journey was far from over, they had laid the first stones of a bridge that could one day unite their worlds. As the months passed, Alex and Lyra's love became a legend whispered across both worlds, a story of unity that defied centuries of isolation and distrust. They had stood together against forces that sought to divide them, and in doing so, they had created something timeless, a bond that would echo in the hearts of those who dared to believe that understanding was stronger than fear, that love was a bridge over impossible distances. Their worlds had not changed overnight. There were still those on both sides who resisted, who feared that any form of unity would lead to the erosion of their values, their traditions. But Lyra and Alex had ignited a spark, one that grew brighter with each story shared, each encounter between Earth and Tora 9. They were proof that two hearts, no matter how different, could create a connection so profound that even the stars themselves seemed to bow to its light. One quiet evening, they found themselves on a high ridge overlooking the Tellurian landscape, its rolling hills and bioluminescent flora stretching out beneath a vast, starlit sky. It was the place where they had first confessed their love, and where they now came to reflect on how much had changed. The galaxy felt different to them now, no longer an expanse filled with cold, distant stars, but a universe of possibility, filled with connections waiting to be made. As they lay back on the cool grass, hands entwined, Alex pointed up at the sky, tracing the constellations above. "Do you ever wonder," he murmured, "if maybe somewhere up there are others like us? People from different worlds, seeing past their differences, finding each other against all odds." Lyra's eyes softened as she looked up at the stars, her thoughts as endless as the galaxy itself. "I'd like to think so," she whispered. "I'd like to believe that love is a force that reaches beyond planets, beyond cultures. That it's written into the stars themselves. That our story is just one of many, each as beautiful and as defiant as the next." In that moment, under the endless sky, they felt not just the weight of their love, but its vastness, its ability to connect them to something greater. They were not just two individuals from different worlds, they were part of a legacy that would inspire generations. A testament that love could indeed overcome even the most insurmountable of barriers. There were times, of course, when doubt crept in. When the challenges seemed too great, when they wondered if the path they had chosen was worth the sacrifices. But each time they looked at each other and remembered why they had begun this journey. The love they had found was rare, precious, something that could not be replicated or diminished by fear. One night, as they lay watching the stars, Lyra turned to him, her gaze steady, filled with a quiet strength. "Even if the universe tried to pull us apart," she said softly, "I would find my way back to you. No distance, no force could ever make me forget what we have. This love, Alex, it is boundless." He felt her words settle in his heart, like a promise, one that felt as old as the stars themselves. In that moment, he knew that no matter what happened, no matter where their lives took them, their love would endure. It would live on in the stories shared by those who came after them, in the quiet moments between worlds that held their memory. In the end, their love was not just theirs. It became a symbol, a guide for those who would follow in their footsteps, bridging worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. And though their paths were still filled with challenges, Alex and Lyra walked forward, hand in hand, under the stars that had borne witness to their journey. As they looked up, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if blessing the love that had been written in their light, a love that would forever be remembered, a love that was indeed written among the stars.